under Section 107 of the Copyright Act.
August 22nd, 1967, Layne Rutherford Staley was born in Bellevue, Washington, to parents Phil Staley and Nancy McCallum. It's common knowledge who Layne Staley was, lead singer for one of the big four Seattle grunge bands in the 90s, and also that Layne died of an overdose April 5th, 2002. I was stationed by the DMZ in South Korea for my first duty station, and almost done with my tour of duty when I heard the news. I had been so happy that I was short timing and going home after 9/11 changed the direction of my life. But this news changed me in another direction. Instead of warning me against drugs, I knew that the world I had known was coming to an end, and that I wanted to go out the same way my heroes did.
Now I want to make clear what this video is about. It's a hard look at Layne's heroin addiction and its parallels to addiction at large and to myself personally. There are hundreds of videos about Layne's life and career, but in this video we're going to look at his addiction through the eyes of another addict, myself. I was an active opioid addict for about 17 years and homeless on the streets of Skid Row in South Central for 10 years. Well, I would also hobo around and drift around the country a lot, but the vast bulk of this time was spent in Los Angeles.
I'm not going to go over the details of the band's formation, but Layne met Jerry Cantrell while working and living at the Music Bank Studios in Seattle. They played a couple of shows under the name Diamond Lie before taking the name of Layne's previous band, Alice in Chains. At this time, Layne was using cocaine regularly before finding opiates, just like I did. In March of 1990, Andrew Wood of Mother Love Bone relapsed on heroin and died March 19th of an overdose. Layne was at Andy's funeral and took it very hard. 2 years prior, he had met his girlfriend, Dimri Perot, and they started dating around 1990. That same year, Alice in Chains were signed to Columbia Records and released the album Facelift, which would shoot them to stardom. Now, Dimri was already known for her drug use, and with the stress but financial freedom that comes with being famous, Mike Starr's heroin use started getting bigger and more public within their circles. Of course, the story goes that Dimri got Layne on the heroin and Layne got Mike hooked, but who started makes no difference. They all now had money to burn. I'm sure being famous got them all kinds of deals and services. Heroin in the 90s Seattle grunge scene was ubiquitous, with Mark Lanegan, Kurt Cobain, Courtney Love, and of course Andy Wood all using, with thousands more affiliated and fans of the grunge scene using heroin.
Now, another parallel to my life personally is at one time I could afford anything. It wasn't my parents or my family, and honestly, I don't even want to go into how I got this money. If you've seen my Soft White Underbelly interviews, and you already know. But a comment I saw in a video about Layne read, "I always thought my problem was not having enough money for dope. Now I see that's not the case." Well, they both come with dire consequences. When you have nothing and you're sick, you'll do anything to get your fix. And I've heard some jerks say, "Well, I never stole while I was on drugs. It's just something people would do anyway." I call BS. These people either had enough money or their mommies were helping out. Because being a strung out addict causes anyone to steal and do wild things. It's all relative, of course. I went years without stealing. It just depends on how far you're pushed. But the average addict can't afford to stay high or even just well, and that pushes them to do crazy things. On the flip side though, when I had money to buy whatever, my tolerance went through the roof. I'm not going to get into some pissing contest with other addicts into about how much dope they use, but this time I was taking over 300 milligrams of methadone and 2 grams of heroin. That did nothing because I was on the methadone, but before the method, and well, usually 3 Xanax too, but before I got on the methadone, I would do about an 8-ball a day. I became bloated even though I didn't eat anything at all, as methadone will normally do to people. And I would do whatever pills I had, which was a lot. I just had people bring them to me. It affords a freedom that over time causes you to take different risks than being poor. You say things like, oh, if it gets bad, I can get into a plush rehab. I can just start a different drug and taper. I don't care if I overdose. I can afford the best hospitals in LA, etc., blah, blah, blah. And the big difference between Layne and my lifestyle was that he had more money coming in, whereas I didn't. My money ran out quickly, even though I had invested it, but I had no idea how to handle money like that. I didn't have an accountant, and at this time I was traumatized and completely out of my mind with grief.
Layne and everyone else's fame and habits rose as stress and demand began piling. If you expose an active addict to those pressures, they don't have healthy coping mechanisms, and of course they're going to use more and more. When Kurt died in 1994, it scared Layne into a brief sobriety, but went right back. Mike Starr had been kicked out of Alice in Chains a year earlier, much to Layne's chagrin, as the two addicts of the band were tight. On the European tour for the album Dirt, Layne couldn't find heroin going from city to city and had no choice but to withdraw. Going into rehab back home, he went to his friend Mark Lanigan's place and asked if he had anything. That getting high was all he thought about in rehab, and that he really only went to get people off his back. I think most addicts of that time fully understand this, especially those of us that were poor at this particular time. The only place we had to go was the psych ward of a hospital. It really sucked, and with no follow-up treatment, you were going to relapse. Need to burn. Well, Layne would appear on stage at this time with gloves and sunglasses to hide his track marks and eyes. Nodding out is a dead giveaway to opioid use. During a tour with Metallica, Layne would show up high for practice, and Jerry and Sean Kinney vowed to never play with Layne ever again. Alice in Chains manager, Susan Silver, released a statement that the band was canceling its tour due to ongoing health problems in the band. Most people have seen the footage of James Hetfield being a complete jerk.
Anyway, I didn't know Jason wrote that one. Fuck, he's cooler than we all thought, everyone. But this here is, Why did you throw that at me? I have a question. Why did you throw that at me? Why? I thought you were... You guys want to throw shit? Well, walk off the stage, you can throw all the shit you want. We're here to play some music, not to fucking look out for crap like this, man. I know you guys are getting naked and all that shit, having some fun out there, but we play a lot better when we don't have to look at shit flying at us, okay?
Isn't it always asinine and ridiculous watching alcoholics make fun of addicts? Like their addiction isn't just as bad. Alcohol itself is far more destructive on the body. It's the lifestyle of the addict that causes the most damage. Layne tried to kick by himself on a camping trip in central Washington with his friends Johnny Bacalus, Alex Hart, and Ian Doer. One night they went on a run to Safeway for supplies, and some kids started giving Layne a hard time, with Layne ending up clocking the guy. Johnny recalled, "The friends got Layne out of there before the cops could be called and end up in a parking lot with a lot of kids partying. The truck they parked next to was blasting no excuses. The kids stood around staring at Layne but not really believing it. When the chorus kicked in, Layne belted out the words, leaving no doubt as to who he was. Mike McCready of Pearl Jam had been running songs by Layne after they had jammed a few times. They formed the band Mad Seasons with Layne and Mark Lanegan doing vocals. Everyone had to wait hours for Layne to come back from doing dope in the bathroom or to show up to practice at all. By 1995, Layne and Dimry had broken up but were still close. That was the year Rolling Stone magazine published an issue titled The Needle and the Damage Done, with a picture of Layne on the cover. And when Layne and Dimry saw it on a stand when they had gone to the grocery store shopping, Layne nearly passed out. When 1996 rolled around, MTV Unplugged asked Alice in Chains if they wanted to perform an acoustic set. The band accepted and began practice for their first live gig since 1994. With dark sunglasses and pink dyed hair, Layne walked onto the stage to deafening applause. The members of Metallica were in the front row. This was just after Lars and Kirk decided the band's new look was clean cut. If you notice, Mike Inez, who replaced Mike Starr, wrote on his guitar, "Friends don't let friends get friends haircuts." The performance was legendary, and the band played my absolute favorite version of Down in a Hole. Layne did perfect until Sludge Factory, when he messed up a few times, had to be helped back on his stool because he was sliding off. However, this was just some crap someone associated with the Howard Stern show said. I've talked with and seen comments by numerous people that were there, and they said this did not happen. In fact, I saw a taping myself. He messed up Sludge Factory, with the band just laughing it off and restarting the song. I myself have heard Jerry recounting the night of MTV Unplugged show to an interviewer. This is paraphrased. That starting with the Kiss show, there was a sense that his band was essentially over. No one wanted to control the other, and if someone was committed to going out that way, well, that's a tough thing to live with. They wanted to keep things internal, but that's where someone was going, and that's where they're going to do. Jerry calls not feeling too hot by his own hand that night, and that's in the show. In 1996, Alice in Chains was invited to open up for Kiss on July 3rd, 1996, at an arena in Kansas City, Missouri. That would be their last ever live show. While the band played strongly, Layne appeared pretty dope sick and after the show overdosed backstage. Their manager, Susan Silver, said they were unable to revive him and he was taken to a local hospital where he was released the next day and flown back to Seattle. Layne and Dimry circles blamed each other for getting the other on drugs. They had tried going to rehab together, checking into the Exodus Recovery Center, the one that Kurt Cobain had escaped from by jumping over the wall right before he died. The couple just checked out after a few hours. Dimry agreed to stay away from Layne for fear that she was ruining his life. Dimry's health was getting bad from her drug use. When she was 25, she had surgery on both her heart and lungs and had to be put on life support. Just like Layne, she appeared at Mark Lanegan's door, rolling an IV stand behind her and asking for drugs. At the age of 27, Dimry Perot died October 28, 1996. Poor Layne was given the teddy bear she had had in the hospital. In April 1997, Layne would move into the apartment that would become his tomb, isolating himself and doing drugs and playing video games all day.
Isolating is something very common in addicts. I would isolate myself because I didn't want people giving me their opinions on what I was doing all the time. And when I had money, I rarely left my huge apartment above the Sunset Strip. I had drugs delivered to me and would only venture out really to go to the Ralphs next door to me. And I would often see stars, some drug addicts themselves. And I don't really want to talk about who they were in particular, as we, barely knew each other, and it's not my place to say these things.
Liz, Layne's sister, gave birth to her first baby around Valentine's Day. Layne, armed with a camcorder, went to his mom and stepdad's, Jim Elmer, to see his nephew Oscar. Jim said he looked pretty good, but he was shy about his teeth. My own teeth having rotted away in my 20s, and the excruciating experience of losing them, the self-esteem issues, and getting your teeth replaced are horrible experiences. On Layne's last day on Earth, Mike Starr came to visit, and Layne swore that Demery had visited him the night before. Demery's mom said she believed her daughter was there that night to help Layne's transition. Mike was high on benzos, and he said he was there all day trying to keep Layne alive, offering several times to call 911, with Layne refusing and threatening to never speak to him again. Mike got agitated and left, with Layne saying something like, "Don't leave like this." This would haunt Mike for the rest of his life. He went and blacked out in his mom's basement. On April 5th, 2002, Layne shot a speedball, which is cocaine and heroin, something that's killed other famous people and was a favorite of mine. It wasn't until April 19th, 2002, that Layne's mother called 911 standing in front of Layne's door. Reading and writing this, I think of all the times my loved ones did the same thing, 100% expecting to find me dead. I remember being highly annoyed when this happened, not grasping at all what they were going through. I often feel survivors' guilt of all the people that have died in front of me from overdose or killed by a dealer, or people like Layne that had inspired so many people. Why the hell did I live? What do I have to offer the world? It's something I can never escape and think about whenever I think about the deaths of others from drugs. Layne burned bright, with a voice that was very unique. He was sensitive and artistic, funny and innovative, someone that was troubled. Inside every addiction is a root trauma. Most people never find theirs. They just smile away at their sobriety. And so what? People are happy, so what? And I often bring this up when people use their own experience with things like Suboxone or methadone to judge everyone that's on it. Methadone didn't work for me, but it has for millions. Wouldn't you rather these people be alive? Wouldn't you rather people like Layne and Kurt, Jimmy, Janice, Andy, if they had found another way and just stuck around? But unfortunately, sometimes that's just not how the song goes.